Hello, Solidus here, and today I am going to be talking to you about Discipline Priest and why it is the class that I have had the most fun with in the Shadowlands beta. So, in my previous video, I was talking about Resto Druids in Mythic Plus and how they haven't changed that much and they are still the best healer, probably, for Mythic Plus. But a class that I have actually played more of on the beta than my Resto Druid is the Discipline Priest, and I can tell you that it is really fun to play. So, why is that the case? Well, I think it's probably because Discipline Priests have probably been the healer class that has had the most changes in regards to Mythic Plus out of all of them. And you've had some really cool new abilities be given back to us as part of the unpruning, such as Mind Soothe, for instance, and Shadow Word Death. And I'll talk about them in a little more detail in just a bit. But overall, I've really enjoyed playing this class, and it is probably going to be my new main moving into Shadowlands. So let's talk about some of the changes then. So as baseline now, all priests have access to Mind Blast, Mind Soothe, Power Infusion, Shadow Word Death, Power Word Shield. So two of those that I'll just briefly mention now then. Mind Soothe is just great utility in Mythic Plus. Being able to reduce the aggro range of a specific mob so that you can run past it without pulling is just really good. It can help when those mindless DPS players are not watching where they're going. I'm looking at you, hunters. And you can just reduce the distance that they will gain threat. So in some cases, you don't even need a rogue with Shroud to skip past them. Power Infusion, being able to give somebody else or yourself a haste boost every 2 minutes is really powerful. So it's just two abilities straight away that more utility that priests are now bringing to dungeons as well. And in terms of Discipline Priest then, some changes that we've seen. So you've got Mind Blast, you've got Shadow Word Death. Rapture has been changed, so when you cast it, it now instantly applies Power Word Shield on a target. And then, as before, you can keep applying these shields to people, even if they have a weakened soul on them, and the shields are buffed. And this is a real good cooldown on a relatively short cooldown as well to help you get through these dungeons. Some talent changes that we've seen. So Shadow Covenant has been reworked. It has been bugged for most of the beta, but it has worked for me for over the past week. So now what happens is it instantly heals when you cast it, and then it also increases healing that is done by you. However, you cannot cast any holy spells. So typically when the group has taken quite a bit of damage, I'll use Shadow Covenant, and then I will be using my Shadow Mend, and the healing is noticeably stronger. And it's just when you need to spam those Shadow Mends, it's a really worthwhile talent to have. Spirit Shell on the last row has come back, and it replaces Rapture. You no longer have Rapture, and what it does is it makes your penance, powered shield, and so on. It builds absorption shields rather than healing. I've used it a few times. It's good if you know that there is a predictable amount of damage coming out. So on specific bosses, you may find that this would be a good talent. However, I've typically stuck with Lenience in Mythic Plus, as I found that that's helped. And my talent setup, sometimes I'll be on Twist of Fate or Schism, Angelic Feather or Masochism. Mindbender is where I've particularly been focusing. I've just found that with all of the other things that I've got within a rotation, having Power Word Solace after the nerf, it hasn't been as necessary, and Mindbender has helped in AoE healing situations. Shining Force, Shadow Covenant, Purge the Wicked, and Lenient. So somewhat similar setup to what people have had in Battle for Azeroth in Mythic Plus, and that seems to be the talents. So in regards to like the Shadowlands, like new features and such, the Covenants, obviously they are a hot topic at the moment. Which ones you go with, the fact that we can't swap them and so on. And I think personally after playing there are two Covenants worth looking at. Now, I'm going to contradict myself here and say for a Mythic Plus, Kyrian is probably the way to go. What that does is it gives you Boon of the Ascended, and when you cast it, you then get Ascended Blast, and your Smite is also replaced. And what you can do is you can cast it, you can run into the pack, have your atonements up, and you can just spam the AoE damage ability, and it looks fairly cool, and it does some good healing, it does some good damage, and it's really good in Mythic Plus. From a raiding perspective, then Venthyr is probably the way to go. That gives you the ability Mind Games, and this does a truckload of damage, and it triggers your atonement healing as well. So, that being said, I focus on Mythic Plus. You'd think I'd go Kyrian, but I'm not. I'm actually going to go with Venthyr because I've been playing with it the most and I enjoy it. I find that it doesn't mess up my rotation too much. It does loads of damage. It helps with healing in all circumstances, and the fact that it's going to be good for raiding. And I would like to do both on my priest, which is why I am probably going to be going Venthyr unless any major nerfs, buffs, or whatever happens before we go live on the 27th of October. So you can't really go wrong with either, in my opinion, Kyrian or Venthyr. Pick the one that you prefer, try them both out when Shadowlands launches, when you're leveling up in the zones, and see which one you prefer. But for me, from my perspective, I'm going to be going Venthyr. So in terms of Legendaries then, there are two that I have been predominantly playing with again. One of which I think is going to be great for raiding, and the other one is going to be great for Mythic Plus. So the one for Mythic Plus, which is what we're talking about mostly here, is the Kiss of Death. And this reduces your Shadow Word Death's cooldown by 8 seconds, and it also causes its damage to trigger your Atonement healing. So not only are you able to use Shadow Word Death more frequently, and with this ability, if you don't know, I think we're going to see a lot of fun Twitch clips on the back of this, is that what it does is it inflicts massive amounts of shadow damage to the target, and if the target is not killed by Shadow Word Death, then you take damage equal to the damage that you did to that target. And your damage is increased by 175% to targets below 20% health. So just be mindful, if you don't kill the target with your Shadow Word Death, that damage is coming straight back to you. I have done massive amounts of damage to myself already, and I do expect to see people killing themselves through using this. But all that damage can go into your Atonement healing with this Legendary as well. So if you have Power Word Radiance up straight into this, then obviously you're going to be getting massive amounts of healing in. In terms of the raiding Legendary, which actually is a drop on the second boss, I want to say, of the new raid, Sludge Fist, I think its name is Clarity of Mind, which is during Rapture, your Power Word shields cost 20% less mana, and they apply 6-second longer atonements. So cheaper shield costs for longer shields, which I think is going to be great during ramp for a Discipline Priest whilst raiding. So they are your two Legendaries, which I think are probably going to be the ones that I'm going to be focusing on straight away and are worthwhile doing. The Shadow Word Death Legendary for me is probably be the one that I'm going to go for straight away, and it does drop from the Halls of Atonement, I believe, as well. So hopefully it should be farmable. And after looking at where these Legendary recipes come from, I hope the drop rate isn't ridiculously low, because having to raid multiple difficulties each week just to get this Legendary drop is going to be quite frustrating. So in terms of playstyle then, I haven't played loads of it throughout Battle for Azeroth, recently towards the end. I understand how it plays. Obviously, you're using your atonements to heal through damage and such. So with a Discipline Priest, knowing the dungeon is key, knowing when that damage is going to come out and such. With it being beta, not and running dungeons for the first time and just seeing what happens, obviously it's proving to be quite tricky. But that being said, with the amount of utility that Discipline Priests have, and the amount of damage that you can do, and the abilities that you've got, I've not really struggled, and especially using Venthia as the Covenant, I've just found it quite easy to heal with, which I wasn't really expecting, and the fact that I'm just finding it really, really fun. Not only can you keep the group healthy majority of the times, but you do a shed load of damage as well, and you've got some real cool cooldowns to use and help you when times get scary, like your barrier, for instance, and just blanket 25% damage reduction, rapture on fairly small cooldown. The one downside that I would say to that is sometimes when like the proverbial does hit the fan, then and you haven't got one of those cooldowns, you can struggle. So you might be cooldown dependent. And your defensive cooldown that you have, your desperate prayer, it's not exactly the strongest cooldown either. And because you're a clothy, you are typically quite squishy compared to like the Resto Druid or the Holy Pala, for instance. So there are a little few things that you need to be mindful of, and obviously for me the thing that you probably will find difficult with if you've not played Disc before going into Shadowlands is learning how to heal through the dungeons and which trash mobs do which and what bosses abilities are and so on and so forth. But that's all part of the learning curve, and that's what makes this fun for me. So Priest is probably going to be the class that I'm going to level first because I've had so much fun with it. I think it's great in Mythic Plus, in raids. Yeah, it's going to be great. It does all that damage. It's got barrier. Yeah, you've got great ramp. You might even see 2 of these in like progress guilds. I think it's a solid class to be going into. That being said, I won't be surprised if we don't see some nerfs coming in to Discipline Priest just before Shadowlands goes live. I hope that they do it then and not a couple of weeks in, especially if people have picked Covenants and such. So hopefully before the 27th of October, Blizz can get it sorted. And hopefully we won't get touched, but I just think and expect a couple of nerfs in places here and there. So let me know what you think. Which class are you going to be maining? Is Priest on the list? Is it a potential? If you've liked this video, please feel free to drop me a like. And if you're not already, feel free to subscribe to the channel for more Shadowlands content around Mythic Plus and raids and any of the news that's coming out. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.